an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. It is the judgment of God that sent the famine to teach the Irish a lesson. He said,
Welcome back again, my loves, to the channel. Today we are going to be checking out Irish potato famine, British genocide, how they starved Ireland. Personally, I said I was going to look into Ireland, Irish, history, and today we'll be taking that step into it.
Looking at this topic, they said British genocide, which means this starvation was engineered.
Yeah, by the British.
I don't know. I'm just
I
saying.
know.
So
Okay,
let's
okay. Let's go. Let's go.
before we
to
jump
that.
into conclusion.
many know today the Irish potato blight in 1845 was the cause of the potato disease originally from North America that affected the potato in northern France, Netherlands, and Belgium. But none of these countries were as dependent as a food source as was Ireland, and when the disease reached the Irish fields, the results were devastating. One could say the millions of Irish perished due to the potato blight, but they actually starved to death due to starvation, inhumane treatment, and extortion by the British. Nassau William Sr.
Do you know what I realized? Do you know when we recently did Freedom Isn't Free? They talked about this stuff and this Irish potato stuff in
They
the
did?
video, but they didn't actually. They said it's one of the things people criticize the British for doing bad in history, and now coming into the video and seeing the context it entails, I'm just thinking like
That's bad.
that's cruel.
That's bad.
This is going to be very cruel video.
economist to the Crown, is quoted as saying, "Only 1 million Irish are likely to die, and that will not be enough to do much good." This is the facts of how British starved Ireland. Please subscribe and tell us in the comments below if you believe the British were responsible.
Okay.
The potato was not the only food source Ireland had at the time. Ireland's soil was rich and fertile and ideal for livestock grazing. During the famine, an abundance of wheat, oats, barley, beef, poultry, dairy, fruit and vegetables were farmed on Ireland's soil that the Irish themselves worked to produce. Only the Irish were not allowed to consume these crops. The fields the Irish worked on was mostly owned by British landlords who sold and exported most of the crops, grain and livestock for England's consumption. The British government's indifference to the famine helped cause thousands of needless deaths. On the eve of the famine, the population in Ireland stood at about 8.5 million. The British felt Ireland was overpopulated and that it was the fault of the Irish people for being poor. The Irish were referred to as being lazy, barbaric, and barely human.
You mean lazy barbaric, but they're the one farming in the farmland? What do you mean barely humans?
Cold and shivers entered my body when I heard that, the way they talk about human beings. I don't like when people refer to human beings as nothing. It pisses me off. It pisses me off because, we may have different colors of skin, but deep down, I know we share one certain type of feeling.
Yeah,
We
all
feel
have
pain
emo- Thank
in the
you.
same way. We feel loss in the same way. We feel love in the same way. So if we share the same types of feeling, imagine a fellow lion telling his fellow lion, "You are nothing." How does that sound? Which means inevitably that lion is also nothing.
2 million Irish men, women and children perished by starvation and related diseases during the famine, and another 2 million immigrated from the island to escape poverty and starvation. British colonized Ireland and confiscated the land to raise beef cattle for the English market, forcing the Irish into deeper poverty and out to live on the land that had more rocky terrain. The estates were owned by absentee English landlords that charged exorbitant amounts of rent. Rent collection was left in the hands of the landlord's agents or middlemen. This assured the landlord of a regular income and relieved them of direct responsibility while leaving the tenants open to exploitation by the middleman. Landlords lived their life in England and perhaps visited their estates once or twice a lifetime. Tenant holdings were so small that no crop other than potatoes would suffice to feed families. And so this is how millions of Irish became reliant on the potato. 90% of land in Ireland was owned by the British landlords. The Anglican Church was more than just a spectator to these events. The church owned 5 million acres of Irish.
I don't really know. I think it's when we dive into the history of Ireland, that's when we'll actually find out why it was so.
You're just like saying 90% of Nigerian land is owned by another country.
Well, it won't surprise me. It won't surprise me checking the amount of debt.
Okay, our country.
Do you understand? So it won't surprise me. It won't surprise me. So, sometimes it could be the effects of a bad leadership
Or economic.
or economy. So desperation could lead to a lot of things.
Land. In the first winter of the famine, while 400,000 Irish starved to death, the worst year of mass starvation, the amount of food that was exported out of Ireland proves there was enough food to feed the entire Irish population that was starving to death during the famine twice over. English landlords continued to export food from Ireland to England. The British government could have outlawed the export of food while people starved. However, the shipping records indicate the government allowed the landlords to export £17 million sterling worth of grain, cattle, flour, eggs, and poultry, as well as fruits and vegetables. Food that could have fed 12 million people, twice the number of Irish tenant farmers dependent on the potatoes. The food was shipped from ports in some of the worst famine-stricken areas of Ireland, and armed British regiments guarded the ports and granaries to guarantee British merchants and absentee landlords their profits. And when food prices went up, they did not increase Ireland's wages. They also imposed tariffs on food, making food more expensive to purchase. While Irish men
the same thing over here. Although there is no famine though, but it's practically the same thing over here right now. Whereas the prices of things go up and the wages, the minimum wages remain the same. So I really understand the pain of these Irish men, although I did not feel the starvation they felt, but I could understand the pain of injustice being done to them, because this is inhuman. This is inhuman. I see the fact that they were exporting 17 million worth of food, and yet the population of Ireland was just 12 million. Which means they could still export 5 million worth of food and leave that 12 million for them. But greed in the human nature. I think if I can ask God for one thing, I would say take away greed from man. Greed.
Women and children lay dying on the streets of Ireland. The cruelty of the English continued as they passed the dead and the dying Irish with food and livestock bound for England. When in 1846, the Whigs political party came into power in Britain and put Charles Trevelyan in charge of famine relief in Ireland. Trevelyan was a big believer in the free market, where prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. No government intervention in the economic system, including no legislative control over employment. Trevelyan didn't work at stopping the starvation and rather felt it was necessary, saying, quote, "The famine is an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. It is the judgment of God that sent the famine to teach the Irish a lesson." He said, "The real evil is not the physical evil of the famine, but the moral evil of the selfish, perverse, and turbulent character of the Irish people." The food they offered to the starving was being limited, as food must not be given to the starving to not dispose the food industry. Many say there was food being imported into Ireland to help the starving, but it was largely being used to feed the cattle that would be slaughtered to feed the British. It was not being used to feed those in need. Any temporary relief measures being given to the Irish had stipulations. The British required that food only go to the people who owned no land, forcing the impoverished people to sell any remaining land they had to their landlords. When other countries such as America sent food to help the hungry, they found that the British charged exorbitant cargo fees, as the British wanted the food to be transferred to their ships. England profited from the Irish suffering, and in 1848 Charles Trevelyan was knighted for his work on the Irish famine relief.
What did you work? Nothing.
Landlords raised the tenants' rent so that they could evict them to use the land for farming, as it was more lucrative. When tenants could not pay for their rent, they were evicted and their homes demolished by order of Lord Palmerston, British Prime Minister. As many as 300,000 were evicted to die on the streets. Landlords were so eager to get rid of tenants that some of them offered to pay for their passage to America and Canada in exchange for their land. Many were desperate to escape in the famine. The landlords paid for the lowest class passage where it was overcrowded with sickness and disease, with poor access to food and water. 30% of passengers would perish and be buried at sea. These ships were called coffin ships, and over 2 million Irish left their beloved country, at least 600,000 never even making it across. Many Irish who were evicted and had no money to pay for their passage to America moved to impoverished areas of England to look for work. Anti-Irish prejudice was widespread. Those with Irish accents or Irish surnames were barred from getting employment and living in public houses. There were signs in the pubs and restaurants saying, "No Irish, no blacks, no dogs." And on help wanted signs, they added, "No Irish need apply." When the potato famine hit, the British government didn't try to help. Instead, the landlords saw it as an opportunity to make even more money from the land. They compared the removal of Irish in Ireland to the whites' removal of Indians in America. As the Irish died or left the country, a newspaper, the London Times, wrote, "Soon a Celtic Irishman will be as rare on the banks of the Liffey as a red man on the banks of the Manhattan."
Wait. I just had something. No Irish, no black, no dogs. God made everything in his own image, but man created racism. I'll leave my comment. I'll leave my comment. God made everything in his own image, but man created racism, created division.
I'm speechless, to be honest. I'm shocked. I'm sure I didn't even know the Irish people had gone through something like this. And to even see them and the British, they are really, really close to each other.
You see, there is one thing
More
I'm
of
always.
brothers, and
I know this is off topic, but there is one thing I'm always proud of for my country for is the fact that I don't know about before, but I know that all the history I've read, I have never seen a hint of what racism.
because this
Love.
is between
Do you
themselves.
understand?
Like, it's not even, they are not even far apart. They are in the same coastal area.
Loving one another. Loving one another.
Well, I think what the Britain wanted to do was to take to take their lands from them, because they even said something like the way America got rid of the Indians. So the same thing they wanted to do in Ireland. And to see Ireland is still a country on its own. To see they actually fought and they stood.
Actually,
Because they are still
I've
there.
actually thought that I've always thought that Ireland and British are like brothers and sisters kind of
It's a
like
relationship. I
relationship.
didn't even know they had such, kind of history.
It's devastating though.
It's heartbreaking. No, this actually broke my heart. Starvation is one bad
Is
thing.
it alive
Life
someone?
somebody.
Is a cruel. I feel like it's the most cruelest means.
Your organs literally just fail slowly. This no, this
Your
broke
body
my heart.
begins to eat
No,
itself to
this broke my heart.
survive.
I can't even believe this. Like it's unbelievable. I
You
didn't
begin
know
to suffer
such bad energy was shared.
malnutrition. The processes of starvation is mind-boggling. If you really know how starvation graduates from one stage to another, and each of these steps, it is not pleasant. It is agonizing.
Oh God, God. Please let me know what you think about this down there in the comment section. I'll see you on my next one.